Hey, it's Joe Farro Geek Toolkit, and today we're going to talk about how to do some really cool automations with a computer. We're going to talk about command lines. We'll talk about hooking in things like the camera if you want to detect if you're on a Teams or Zoom call. Talk about hooking that stuff into the weather. We'll talk about basically animated backgrounds and how to change those. Basically things to do with the computer, and the idea behind this is that you just understand how to bridge Home Assistant to your PC so that you can actually do some really cool automations. Let's start out with a demonstration. So what I have here is a dashboard. Now we'll talk about how to build this and what it does, but also I just want to give a quick demo. So here's my desktop background, and you can see if I click Disney here, I'm actually going to set from Home Assistant the background of my computer. So now it's playing a video of the Disney Castle. That's really cool for my daughter's automation where the room changes. I showed that in another video. This is how I did that. I'll explain that. We can also change to other things, like this is an LCARS one. So again, just being able to control, these are buttons in a grid, and then we can control the background automations. Now, you notice also this active window here. If I change the window I'm clicked on, so for instance, if I click on my camera window, it actually says active window camera. That is incredibly useful. I'll give you an example of what that can do. If you look at my background right now, I have one light turned on, and it's a white light right now. So say I'm going into a call or something where my camera starts up with, let's say, Zoom. What I'm going to do is detect the Zoom background, and then, or I'm sorry, the Zoom window title, and then you see my background light turns red. This is basically an on-air light now, right? Like if I close this will change again. It's basically looking at the window title, and when it sees Zoom, I can set that to anything. It's changing the light color. What's cool about doing it with the window title is that makes it basically agnostic to any app. I can do this for Zoom, Teams. I can have different colors for each one. And so on. I can even do stuff like if I'm doing a Facebook call. I basically just need the window titles, and I can go from there. Sometimes you can actually trigger off the webcam with this software too. And the software we're going to talk about is called HASS Workstation Service. So we'll talk about that and how to hook all this up. Let's do a quick walkthrough of the rest of this here. You can see I've got my CPU and GPU load. These are just, again, things I'm pulling off of my computer that I'm able to do automations on or actually just build dashboards against. I also have my GPU temperature being pulled. The other thing here is this main session says in use. If I lock my machine, this actually changes to locked. So I can actually do stuff like if my machine's locked or if my machine's logged off, I can have automations that change things. I could also do stuff like shut down my computer, reboot my computer, and so on with buttons on here or as automations. So this gives me full control from my Home Assistant machine to my PC. Finally, the last thing I want to show is one more demo just to show you how powerful this is, or just a really fun thing you can do with this, and that is weather. So here you can see that it's listed as cloudy right now. I'm in Washington, so this will happen in a second, but I'm listed as cloudy. I'm going to use the debug or the developer tools here. We're going to set it to rainy. So you can see I set the state there for my weather to rain. And watch what happens to my desktop background. My desktop background actually changes to look as if it's raining based on the weather. And I just thought that's really cool. Now I artificially changed it here, but that was something that we can talk about. How do we do that? Basically, how are we controlling all this? So let's talk about that. So here's the UI for HASS Workstation Service. You really only use it for configuration, and then it kind of runs as a service in the background. You really don't ever see it again. It's very, very simple. So I'll show you what happens. There's two things here. There's sensors that you can add, and then there's commands at the bottom. Let's show you the UI for adding sensors. So if I click on add here, I get this window here. And the active window sensor is how I was detecting the active window. But we can go through and let me see, microphone active, we can trigger on that. Let's click on that one actually. So all I do is give it a name. Now this PC is called Joe PC. And then I'm just gonna say mic active. Now I can give it an update interval of how many seconds. And what I'm going to do is bring this over. I want to show you how just incredibly fast this is. So we're going to bring over the dashboard that we had here. I'm going to click save here. You saw the sensor pop up. And I just did a quick pause there so you didn't have to watch all this. We're going to basically say mic active. We're going to add a new thing here. And we're going to add a there it is, Joe PC mic active, an entity. Click on that there. And there we go. We're going to click that. And there you go. Joe PC mic active is on right now. So that shows how fast it is to add an entity. Now, if I click on this, you see it actually shows up as a sensor. Let's see if I can show that here. So it's a binary sensor. So it's either on or off. And that's what got added here. Now, zoom is very similar. You can see the zoom when I was adding it on. You get the history. You get all of the home automation goodness of using Home Assistant. All these entities show up there. You can do all of the things like if you want to have an automation trigger and so on. They're just binary sensors for a lot of them. Now there's one other thing, and that's the command line stuff. So let's take a look at that. Then here you see the command lines. I'm going to click add here. You've got a number of things. You've got like log off and basically media commands for playing or fast forwarding music. You've got your reboot commands, shut down, and all of that as well. There's mute. So you've got control over a lot of things, but the main one that I use is this custom command. This one here, you give it a name and you give it a command line and it will execute that command line. Let's talk about how we were doing the wallpaper stuff, and that will give us a command line that we can actually practice with, so I can show you how this all gets put together. Okay, so this is a GitHub for Lively Wallpaper. Now, if you've heard of Wallpaper Engine is a Steam-based system for doing similar things. Lively Wallpaper is an open source, free, easy to use system for actually animating your backgrounds and doing more. You can actually make games your backgrounds. You take Unity and make an animation there, put that on your background. There's a number of things here. I've got a lot to explore myself, but the main thing is RocksDanister, I asked him, hey, can you give me the ability to control this via command line? And I said, if you do, I can do some really cool home animation stuff, and that would be really neat. And he did, and so that one we were off and running. So here's the page showing different options for this, and different wallpapers. There's also a Reddit group that has a bunch of cool wallpapers that are available. You can take any YouTube video, you can take any web page and make that your wallpaper. So there's some really, really cool stuff here. And again, there's like music visualizers, there's clocks and all that. All this stuff where it's more than just an image or a video. It's actually, there's like kind of miniature apps running and so on. It also does all the smart things, like if you launch a game, it will turn itself off and, lower its GPU usage and all that. And it doesn't take up much anyway. It's just really well done, really well efficient. So we're going to talk about how to get that set up. Now, you download and install it, you basically get this UI here, and this one is very simple. If you click on any of these, you get that background. Now, this was the Avengers background, and if you looked at my videos for any of the Dynaframe animation stuff, all of that applies to these. If you want to make your own animated backgrounds, you can do that. Now, there's ones here, like this one's a great example where it actually will follow the mouse, so it just shows some of the interactivity. Now, how do we actually control these? Well, the first thing we need is a command line that will set these. Then we'll make that a button that we can control in Home Assistant. That's just the basic concept here. So the first thing we want to do is find out what is the file location of this. So I'm going to just right click on any of these, say open file location. And this gives me a file location here. I'm going to copy this. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to get the livelycu command line utility. And this is off of the GitHub page. I'm going to link to this as well. I'll link directly to this because it took me a second to find it. But this is a very well documented utility that has command lines for all sorts of stuff dealing with the wallpapers. Now, one of them is being able to actually set the wallpaper right here, set wallpaper. You pass it a file path. You can also do multi-monitor and set different wallpapers for different monitors and so on. So what I've done is I've downloaded livelycu and I've put that path to that wallpaper there. And when I hit enter, there you go. It sets it with that command line. Now that's perfect because that gives me a command line that I can copy and then paste. Now, one thing to know about the command line is if you don't have this in your path, you're going to want to use basically your full path to the exe for the command line to pass into Home Assistant. Okay, so if you note, I've added the C lively on the beginning here because that's what folder it's in. And I've copied and pasted, or copied this. So now we're going to go into HASS Workstation Service. I'll show you how to set this up. So here we are back in HASS Workstation Service, and we're going to set up a custom command. We're going to call it I'll just call it set water wallpaper. And we're going to put that command in there. Now, one thing I can do is hit test. To test this, I of course need to check something else. So let's go to this wallpaper. And then we're going to basically hit test. It will show us a window. It says you won't see this normally, but I can see the water in the background. So I know that that is correct. I'm going to hit save. We're going to go back over to Home Assistant. I'm going to try to not even make a cut and show you how fast this is. So what I need here is a new button. So I'm going to edit this button thing. We're going to add a new button. This is a grid. There's a button card. And if I search for water, I bet that, yeah, there it is. Set water wallpaper. It shows up as a switch. One thing I want to clean up real quick is I changed the set water wallpaper, but I didn't give it a name. It's really nice if you do a name, then this is a lot cleaner. And if you give it an icon, so you can do MDI colon and then any of the MDI icons. There we go. So now I can click on this and have it change. So there's the Disney Castle. If I click water, we should get that water one. If I click Disney, we should get the Disney Castle again. Now these are switches, so this means that we can put them into home automations and so on. So let's talk about an automation using that to basically tie an automation to running a command line on my machine. And we'll use the desktop as something visual I can show you of this running. So right now this is the weather. The weather is showing cloudy, and believe me, I'll get there. Give me a sec. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set the weather to rainy just to show what this looks like here. I'm gonna click set state, and now the weather has set that background. How did that work? Well, let's talk about that automation. So we're going to go here to configuration, and I'm just going to walk you through this instead of building it out. Basically, what we're doing here is we're saying the state of the weather, if it gets set from anything to rainy, we call a service, just like when we're turning a light switch on, we call a service switch turn on, and then we pass it the switch of setting the rain wallpaper. Now, if I wanted to do the water rain paper here, I could basically click here. It's going to filter to my switches. I could set it to L Cars, Disney, Avengers, whatever. Now, if these are setting wallpaper command lines, but if I wanted that switch to do something else, all I have to do is have that command line do something else, and then I can have the automation execute that. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is that zoom light where the light was turning on and off. I did two automations for this, one for on, one for off. If we edit this, I'll show you how this works. If the binary sensor for detecting the zoom window turns to on, then I use basically in my light tutorial explains this, we're going to set the light to a color name of red. Very simple. Now I picked that one light back there, which is cool because I can actually move that out to my hallway. And then if my wife or child is coming, they can see if I'm recording like a YouTube video or whatever. I could have a button that I could click, or I could just say, hey, if I'm in this editor, I'm probably working on a YouTube video. So this is a really cool way to notify somebody of something, like maybe I'm at work, and if my VPN's connected, I can do that, stuff like that. So basically anything you can detect using this app, you could have a light turn on or some kind of automation. The final thing I want to talk about is I haven't gone through all of these yet, so let me just show you real quick what this looks like. These little gauges, I did this in the weather dashboard, very similar, but all they are is they come back as sensors. So this is for CPU load, GPU load, and temperature. So you can see sensor CPU load, and I've just got it on there. Same with GPU load. I find gauges work really well because they typically go 0 to 100 anyway, and you can actually do stuff like, say, you know, if it's over 50%, change it to yellow and stuff like that. Okay, so where do we get this? Well, HASS Workstation Service is actually up on GitHub. Also, it's a free utility. It's done by Sleevezipper, and he's got amazingly well done documentation, screenshots and all. This is one of my favorites because he shows just kind of everything that this thing can do, from memory usage to the active window. There's clock speeds and so on. He shows how to do WMI commands, which if you know WMI, you can query all sorts of stuff about the computer. So it's very extensible, very powerful. There are other ways of doing this, and I will look at those in future videos after I've played with them a bit. But this was the first one, and it was just so easy that it just kind of blew me away. Now, the final thing I want to talk about, I'll have these links in the description of how to get all this stuff, basically where to get it from for Lively and this. But the other thing I want to talk about is how does this work? You do need an MQTT set up on your machine. So if you haven't done that, make sure you've added like Mosquito or some kind of broker, because you do have to point it at the broker. And if you use MQTT Explorer, which I've talked about in my last videos, I love this thing because it lets you see how things are working and what's going on behind the scenes. The active window, you can see right here, there's a sensor that's getting pushed up to Home Assistant. Joe PC is the name of my PC, and under that PC, the active window is getting pushed via MQTT. The CPU load and so on is getting pushed. So you can actually debug and see how this stuff's getting pushed up there and how it actually works behind the scenes. This 192.168.1.169 is my broker. It's also my Home Assistant machine. I run the Mosquito add-on to get that work. That broker looks like this. You add the Mosquito, you give it a nice basic configuration. I do use an authenticated Mosquito broker. I like to have the authentication. One last thing, I would be amiss if I left you without telling you this. If you're using this stuff, you are enabling the ability to run a command line on your computer to your home automation network. You want to make sure that you've got things secured all the way down the chain, from how much you expose externally to your network all the way down to the command lines that you expose. One of the things I really liked about this is you create your command line, you expose that, you don't expose any crazy parameters, and it can trigger just that command line. But still, anytime you're doing any kind of communication with your home automation system, you want to make sure that you keep things very simple and locked down. So be aware of that. Hopefully this was a useful video. I love this because I had no idea this was even possible. I really expected it to be a lot harder. I was doing my own MQTT stuff in Python for a little bit there. And when I found this, I was like, this is amazing. This is super useful. Why are we not talking about this more? So HASS Workstation Service, great work there for Sleevezipper. Lively, RocksDanister, thank you for adding the command line tools to make this video possible. I want to thank them both. I'll have links to everything in the description. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I'll handle and try to help whatever I can. Thanks for watching. I'm Joe Farro with Geek Toolkit. Until next time.